Anyway, I'll be right back. I'm running a little behind.
By the way, Jason, I love that you come into the show with a 32-channel console. That's amazing.
Jason, do you eat this kind of stuff right here?
Tillamook? Sure.
Oh, okay, good.
Not a vegan. I'm only half crazy.
You're not totally weird. Here's my breakfast, Nigel.
Yeah, cheese is not on this diet. No dairy. No dairy.
Really?
Oh, yes. No eggs.
No eggs. Wow. Jason, you're out.
Oh, I'd be dead. Getting back to what Bill was saying about breath work, I didn't find my voice like my normal range until I learned to speak more slowly. And that immediately changed my tone.
Absolutely. I found the same thing too. I worked for years just painfully listening to my unedited podcasts where just trying to work on getting rid of all the superfluous filler words that we put in our language, like the likes and the ums, and it wasn't until just trying to embrace. Somebody told me one time to just embrace silence, to just pause and think about what you're going to say, and that really helped me a lot. But it took years.
Okay, the next time you listen to Jeffrey speak on here, and I've told him about this 50 times, he knows. Are you listening, Jeffrey? He says this a lot, and it bugs me. He says, and things like that. Cliche.
Yeah, we all have those little idioms we fall back on. You know what I mean?
I was trained with Toastmasters, and so they have a cliche horn and an meter while you're speaking.
Yeah.
And it trains you.
Do they hook you up to electrodes every time you say
Now, that's a show I'd watch.
Feedback loop. That's right.
You know, there's a reality show for you.
And my teacher was an actor, and so he taught us how to present yourself on the stage and how to walk on stage. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, a lot of actors do have good diction, but I see more and more of them now that just mumble through words.
Well, the stage actors didn't have the option to do that. And I think it was Michael Caine or one of those longtime actors was talking about the difference in having to learn to pull back when he got in front of a camera, because the stage actor thing just looks false.
Yeah, and a camera frame for sure.
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about digital media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about studios. $1,000 studios. So we're going to, over this year, we're going to keep on increasing the price. But we're going to start with the smallest ones. I think there's a lot of people like, how do we fit into $1,000? But there's plenty of things that we can do that will make you look great at $1,000, make you sound great. And we're going to talk about what those things are. So stay tuned for that. If you've got questions about that, the type of equipment, so on and so forth, go ahead and throw those questions in right now. Of course, you can throw in general questions. We're always looking for questions. You decide what the show is going to do. So as a viewer, as the producers, your job is to tell us, these are the questions we want you to cover. This is the order we want you to cover it by voting. So get in there and vote early, vote often, ask your questions. And let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, Minnesota, looking for comments and advice on micro outsourcing, editing, and social media work. As an example, if I needed just a few simple video edits per week, some top and tails, some reformat horizontal into vertical video, and then post it to XYZ places.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I wanted to make an observation about general outsourcing of this sort of stuff, particularly for social media. Outsourcing is not necessarily cheaper. It's just more efficient use of your time to get somebody else to do it, depending, of course, how much your time is worth. I do this, or my company does this quite a lot. But I have to tell you, we limit the social media we do that for. We don't mind doing it for some things where personality is easy to replicate, but particularly things on Instagram, places where your brand is very important to you. It's very hard for somebody to imitate that.
Yeah, 100%. Jason?
Yeah, I completely agree with Nigel, but I will offer an option here. Fiverr with 2 R's, I think, is kind of the best mix of very inexpensive, and if you can it in a very specific way, it should be able to do what you need.
Go ahead, Bill.
And also just understand that it's easy to ask for things, and it's hard sometimes for people to understand the difficulty. For example, you gave 2 examples here, top and tails. That is almost universally really simple. So for somebody to go in and top and tail something, you're just finding a point and cutting off everything before that, and then finding a close point and cutting off everything after that, so you don't get the big boring negatives before and after the content you want. Simple. You can do that very quick. Reformatting horizontal into vertical, there is a way you can do it that simply by just saying center punch the vertical video out of the horizontal video and let everything run that way. But if you do that, you're often going to get a horrible result, because if there's a person on the frame speaking over here and you've center punched them and a person over here, neither of those 2 people appear. So literally you have to go through every minute of the video and make creative choices if you want a really useful, compelling piece of content to come out of it. And that means however long the video is, somebody has to sit there and make those choices every frame along the way rationally. So just understand that for you as the producer to understand what you're asking somebody to do and how much work that entails is a part of this process.
Yeah, and the thing that I often say to people when we're working on this kind of thing is it's easy to watch content, or it's easy to make content. It's not easy to do both. And so as we try to make something where we're just pushing out a lot of content, a lot of times you kind of water down your brand. You water down what you're doing by just trying to do the easiest thing that you can to push out a bunch of things. And so really look at, I think you'll do better off doing less content better than doing more content so-so. So I would, think about how to do that there. I do think that Fiverr is probably a place that you go if you really need this done. But I also would really recommend thinking about how much you're putting out and what the quality is, so that people are really looking forward to it each time. Next question.
Tom Ferguson's up next from Phoenix, Arizona. It's World Backup Day. Are you backed up?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I just thought I might as well nag everybody here while I'm at it. Make sure that you're doing the right thing. Are you doing NAS storage, perhaps, for your projects that are not current? RAID on that hardware backup? Any single point of failure taken care of? Boy, if you're not there, you need to back up.
You go, John.
It's an interesting paradigm, because I reformatted my entire drive when Ventura came out because it needed to be a clean install. And, in the old days, I would have to grab my backup drive and reload all my applications. Now I keep everything, all of my data files are all up on Dropbox, and that makes it super simple for me. And then all my machine is up on Time Machine. So cloud storage has been a godsend for me.
Go, Jason.
I'll just reiterate the 3-2-1 rule of backup. You need 3 copies of the data, the original and 2 backups, 2 of which are on different physical forms of media. That is the cloud or a NAS and a NAS, one of which is in a different physical location. So the way I accomplish this in my studio is I have a Synology NAS that in turn uploads selectively to cold storage, and that's the stuff that I simply cannot be without. And it's that simple.
Very good, Bill.
And don't forget the long-range dumping of stuff that is never going to be of value to you. I found after 20 years of doing hard drive backups, I have stuff that I still haven't gone back and said, you know, it's 2007 content. There's almost no reason I'm going to need 99% of this. It's time to get rid of it out of my life so I don't just continue to add up more and more backup drives forever.
Alex?
My solution for a while, which hasn't failed me, is using Backblaze. So what I do is, because I work with a lot of big projects and I don't want to have to keep buying more and more hard drives, once I'm done with that project, once it's fully synced to Backblaze, I actually get rid of it. I delete it off my local hard drive. There is an option with Backblaze that you have to pay extra for it, but they will keep your data forever, so to fully archive stuff. So if you do 5 years from now, you need to go back and you need to download something, you can still do it, and that's worked for me.
And how much is Backblaze? Backblaze?
I think they increased the price, but I think I'm only paying about $60 a year.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
What Alexander is talking about is immutability, and that is one of the really neat features that Backblaze has throughout every one of their plans. Is you can upload something and say, you're not allowed to change that. If I change it, reiterate it and let me pay for the storage, but don't allow me to change it. And that is, ransomware proof.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida comes up to us next with, how do you get Midjourney results without text?
I thought, I was like, how do you generate something in Midjourney without text? And I was like, you need text. You need to figure this out. So I was trying to put together, like, what is he talking about? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, it's a stickler, isn't it? And this is we've been playing with Firefly now, and it's clear that they're going to diffuse things into layers on Photoshop to make this particular thing easy, where you're going to be able to easily edit stuff in and out. The problem is their database, their model's going to be much smaller than Midjourney. It's a challenge with Midjourney right now. I find myself having to take all that stuff into Photoshop and edit it in there.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part is that it's hard to say no this, no that, because it's an additive process the way it comes together. So I think that the thing that we're hoping for is that Midjourney version 6 will put the text on layers, and create those rather than the same way that Firefly does it. Or what a lot of us are hoping for is just see layers in general, layers, depth maps, so on and so forth, so that you can make some selections inside of what Midjourney's outputting. So that's what we're hoping for there. I actually don't have a solution for that. I go in and I find it funny that I'm a retoucher. I am a diffusion retoucher, which is that I go in and it gets super close to what I want. It's got a couple weird things, and I just go in and fix them in Photoshop, as opposed to trying to argue with it to get the thing that I'm trying to get out. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. What are the best options for ticketed video now that Facebook is shuttering theirs, especially for low-budget nonprofits?
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that before the show, we didn't know that Facebook did this. I think that's probably why they're shutting it down, is that a lot of us just didn't know that Facebook did ticketed events. We did find a link from a Switcher Studio on how to do a ticketed event from 2020. But I think that it just didn't really turn the corner. A lot of the larger producers of video, live streams, pretty much walked away from Facebook in 2017. So 2017, 2018, Facebook changed its algorithms, and when they changed those, it dramatically affected the profitability of doing anything on Facebook. So a lot of folks, you don't see the same kind of streams on Facebook as you used to, because a lot of the companies that could do really high end ones went somewhere else because it wasn't a great business model. And so I think that I think that that's probably, so anything they add now is really just for folks that are doing hobby streams. So, or it's a stream of something else that is one of the outputs that they're doing, not the only output. No one, I don't know anybody that builds for Facebook anymore. And so which is it's amazing given that they, for a moment, they were the place that you stream to. So anyway, so I think that's the challenge they have there. Vimeo has a lot of for pay solutions. I think what you want to look at is both Vimeo's, and Bill was talking about this before the show, but Vimeo has a lot of solutions, whether it's pay-per-view, but they also have OTT solutions. Now, this may not be for a very small nonprofit, but things to look at is that Vimeo has a great way, turnkey. So, I want to be in these stores. I want to be in the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, and I want to have a bunch of things, and I want it to all be branded around, and I want some live and some VOD, and I want to build those controls. And I think Vimeo has done the best job at making those relatively turnkey to make that work. So I think that's probably your best bet beyond building, your own. The other thing you can do is do something as simple as Squarespace with Stripe, and building something that gives you access to a page, and then do some embeds. So if you're really trying to do something inexpensive, that's almost a zero cost to do that kind of thing. So that's another option as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. With many large venues have migrated to mobile-only ticketing, wouldn't network congestion be a real issue if you have lots of people using data in the same space?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So most of the ticket venues in Austin now are all completely e-tickets. I think they'll accept a scan off a barcode on a printed ticket, but mostly they're e-tickets. Most of us get those e-tickets on our devices before we leave our home or on our network. In fact, I think it was the Cure tickets, they wouldn't even allow you to print them. They won't allow you to transfer them. The problem that Taylor Swift has had with the way their tickets are done is changing a lot of things for us. Once you get to the venue, people used to have handheld ticket readers. I don't think they were as much checking whether anyone else had come in on that ticket as much as they were certifying that was a legal ticket. But those have now been replaced by polls rather than handheld devices. And there are SSIDs, there are networks within any location that are secured to the ticket people only, and they give them a significant bandwidth. But I don't think they're actually checking that you're the only person as much as authenticating that that's a legal ticket.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I just want to say a momentary bit of silence for all of the kids who, like me as a young man when I was in my teens and early 20s, was able to get tickets to see good shows. I don't think that's ever going to come back again because it has become such a huge conglomerate-driven business. And when you see mid-level tickets going above $1,000 a seat for things like a Swift concert or Bruce Springsteen concert or one of the iconic names in the business, it's going to change how people relate to artists and music, and I'm just sad for that.
If only there were other ways to watch live things like in theaters. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. Panasonic makes some low-cost prime micro 4/3 lenses that support autofocus. Has anyone tried these and know if they're any good? And he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Jason.
I've never used the primes, but no one else really jumped in here. I really like the mid-level zooms from Panasonic, and I have another one from, who is it? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking, but quite good, and I can control them. For example, the zoom can work directly through the studio cameras, and I have no complaints. But as far as primes, no, I've never had the guts to try just a prime because I'm so used to that full frame.
Yeah, I think that if you're looking for that, it should be fine. I think that the Panasonic autofocus is probably not quite as good as the Sony, but it's pretty strong. And for the kind of things that we're talking about, I think you'd probably be fine. These are, generally Panasonic's making some pretty good glass. So if it's a prime lens, you probably would have some success at it. 25 millimeter, it just depends on, is that the 25 millimeter for that? Is that a full frame 25 millimeter or a 25 millimeter for the micro 4/3? Do you know?
It's for the micro 4/3, yeah.
Because that'd be pretty wide. Are you thinking about using it as a studio, or what are you planning for there?
Well, I'm not even sure if that's going to be the right focal length for me, because I'm going to be, well, this will lead into another question, but basically for a two-person podcast where I need to be able to talk to someone, but I'm not necessarily going to be able to run the controls. I need something. I'm probably going to need autofocus. Because I can't really do manual focus when I don't have the capability to constantly run to the camera and make adjustments, right? And we need some freedom of movement because if the depth of field is so shallow that there's no room to move, that's just not going to work when people are sitting at a bar and they're leaning in and talking to each other like this. You're going to have them going out of focus all the time. So that's why I was thinking I need something with autofocus.
Right. Yeah, no, autofocus is useful. That's why I moved to the camera that I'm using now. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Next question.
Next question comes from Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland. In a recent show, the panel recommended the Shure MV7 as a good choice for podcasting. Does this recommendation stand for an InVision remote contribution mic for Zoom, Teams, and so forth?
Go, Jason.
I don't see why not. My experience hands-on is with its older sibling, the SM7B. But I don't see why not.
For sending things out, that is the mic that I still send out to folks. Like for the Michael Krasny show that we do, we send out MV7s generally, and the reason for that is that they are a solid mic. They have a lot of off-axis rejection, and they're simple. So one of the problems we get into with some of the mics with lots of little dials and buttons is people get them into the wrong state, and it's really easy. And then we're trying to remotely figure out how they can get back to the right state. And so that's the big challenge we've had with any mics that have any serious amount of control. It comes with confusion, on the other side. People bump something, and now we don't know where it is. They don't know where it is. A lot of times the mic doesn't tell you clearly what state it's in. So we've really, we find that the MV7 is probably one of the best ones to send out to folks so far. We're continuing to test mics all the time. But it's funny, I think a lot of mics have been really pushing that we have all these dials and controls on the outside of the mic, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid, is have those. In fact, we would prefer the MV7 to just be turned up all the time. Like we would prefer the little slider on the top that controls volume. Its responsiveness is so low, there's no reason to ever turn it down. So it just needs to be turned up all the time, all the way to the top, in my opinion. Next question.
Philip Older in Katona, New York says, is there software available which will determine the properties of a video file and then create a profile to export that to a common encoding program?
That has been a feature request for compressor for a long time that I send in like every couple of years. Like, hey, I need to throw something in here and have it look at what that is and then have it create a profile to create more like that so that we can match things out. And I don't know any app. There are apps that will show you. There's a Jonas Dottel in our group has one that is, and I can't remember the name of it, but he has a small app. I don't know. He showed it yesterday, and I'm not sure if it's
his file spec app.
His file spec app, is that out?
I have it. I'll find it.
Okay, yeah.
InfoB link.
Yeah, InfoB is there, and so I think that's one that will give you a bunch of that information. There's a couple apps like that, but then you'd have to still type that in and figure out how to create that inside of your encoding app. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, same exact thing you've run into. I use a little app called Media Info. Drop a file on it. It'll give you a readout of all the specifications that exist in that file. But then the problem is getting an intelligent transfer function that will parse that, understand it, and convert it as best possible to the next thing.
It would be really interesting to have somebody do like compressor info or whatever, where it literally looks at all the information and gives it to you in the same order that compressor has it. So all you have to do is just, there's like a little thing that goes down and you just do the thing, that's there. But really, at that point, I mean, the compressor profiles are, I think they're just XML. So you could theoretically have a media info or a info B. Just simply export, pump out an XML that was a controller for that. That'd be really interesting. Next question.
Gene Wilder's up next from Lafayette, Indiana. Opinions on, and then he's got a big link there. It looks like something about TalkBack Manager for field crew. So we're dealing with TalkBack here.
So TalkBack or comms. So TalkBack Manager is a place where you can have an SRT mini server. You have, and they're really talking about ways to communicate back with the reporters. So this is it's interesting.
Yeah, there's a note there about intercom for mobile phones. So I think they want mobile phones to be able to get on an intercom or comms network.
Well, I think that what it appears to do, and again, we're now discovering this with everybody else, but what it appears to do here is actually allow you to be able to get the video back, but be able to talk to the actual reporter. So if someone's picking up their phone and streaming to you via SRT, you can talk into their ear of, hey, I need you to move over a little bit. I need you to do something else. I think we should bring them on. I think that'd be really interesting to have them on the show and see what they're actually doing there. But we don't have any experience with it or strong opinions other than it could be really cool.
Be a brilliant idea. If they could figure out something like a sidechain that's digital that demuxes and provides that back channel comm would be revolutionary.
Yeah. So it'd be really interesting. So let's see if we can't. I've already saved that link, and we'll see if we can reach out to them and see if they're a game to come on the show and talk more about it. Looks like a great idea. Quick reminder that we are, this whole show is written. Well, it's not written, but the outline is created by the viewers, by you. So if you're watching right now, how you create that outline is to ask questions in Makana and to vote those questions up and down. We still got another 40 minutes to go. So from the first hour, and if you've got questions about the $1,000 studio and what you might add to that, then go ahead and throw those in for the second hour. But this is a good time to do it. Next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael says, Seiji Ozawa, whoops, we've moved to a different one. All right, well, to Joe Andrews.
Ourselves there. Hold on. Let's see here. I don't know what happened there. Let's see.
So I can read this from the On Deck Circle. Seiji Ozawa conducted the Saito Kinen Orchestra in a performance stream to the International Space Station. What encoder and or pipeline would you use to stream to the ISS? And would you take any special considerations with the mix for such a unique environment?
So streaming to the ISS or connecting to the ISS is not nearly as complicated as it seems. There's a satellite dish in Houston that uplinks to the ISS, and so there's a little bit of a delay because it's in space, and so the main challenge is getting the connection to Houston from wherever you're at. So there is the NASA in DC sits on what's called the AVOC network, which is an old Verizon optical network that's still in use in DC. So a lot of times what we've done in the past to connect to the space station is to get to an interconnect. An interconnect in DC is at there's a company called DCI that's in 2000M, and it's probably the most connected building in the world. But it has the switch, LTN, 26 dishes on the roof, AVOC, all these other things that are all in one place. Eurovision comes in and out of that building. And so you just need to get it to there. Once you get it to there, you can connect to the NASA network and send that back out. And so that's how you get there. And so you can get there via satellite, via internet, via anything else that's there. And then from there, you manage the handoff to NASA. The only thing you think about a lot is being clear. So one of the things when we've connected to the space station in the past, one of the things we were very careful of is if you're speaking, it's really important that the mic doesn't have any kind of other, you really want something with a lot of off-axis rejection so that the speech is clear, that's there. And then if you're doing any interaction, you kind of build in the response time. You'll see the astronauts will nod a lot because there's a little bit of a time delay that it takes to get there. You'll also see that they usually fill their time by spinning their mic. They just go they throw the mic up and the mic is like spinning in front of them. And they do that definitely to show off. So go ahead, Bill.
Well, it'd be a fascinating thing. And it caused me to think, you don't want to put speakers on the outside of the capsule because you're in space. It's not going to work. But that means that you're really building sound profiles for the inside of a capsule with an artificial environment. That's an interesting idea.
I don't think that, I think that it's more of a, hey, we did it more than they actually really enjoyed it. I'm sure that their in-ear whatever that they're using while they're working is better than anything that they're going to hear in the capsule. It's mostly usually it's a show of technology, and again, the space station, it appears much more complicated than it is to connect. I will say that a lot of broadcasters don't do it very well because they just know how to do it. We found that we could reduce the latency a lot by using fiber to get to where we needed to go, rather than a satellite up and down and twice really creates a lot of delay. So we found some faster, better ways to do that. but it's it's a process. It's mostly logistics. Working with NASA is mostly logistics. It's lots of meetings and time, and there's a script that you follow that needs to be done verbatim to make sure everything works. And there's a lot of security, but outside of that, it's a pretty straightforward process. Next question.
Interesting. You see comms so often in space movies where the pilot is talking to everybody in the crew, and you just wonder, what is the sound profile in that thing? It's going to be a weird atmospheric mist, hard surfaces everywhere. How do you do that even?
Yeah. I mean, most people, when they're doing comms that matter, something's in their ear.
Yeah.
so that's usually the thing that happens. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Vancouver, British Columbia. Has anyone shot a two-person conversation in someone's kitchen other than positioning cameras to try and avoid shiny metal appliances and aiming for short depth of field? What other tips do you have to make it look good?
Go on, Alex.
Yeah, to give you a bit of context, so I'm developing a new podcast that I'm going to do with a friend of mine. So it's just going to be a two-person conversation. I'm thinking about doing something a little more casual looking. So in my kitchen, I've got like this, it's kind of like an open design, open concept, and there's a bar area. So we would be sitting opposite each other on stools. So of course the problem with the kitchen, and assume the lighting's fine, is that I've got some shiny appliances back there. So I'm thinking about at least covering one. I'm going to do my best with the camera angles to not have that and have them there visible, and of course shallow depth of field. But I'm just looking for any other additional tips in terms of set dress or trying to put things in front of things, that kind of thing.
There you go, Jason.
I would always start with room tone, especially in an environment like that. Record a little bit of room tone at the beginning of every episode because it may become very useful if you need it later. Also, the number of refrigerators that I have unplugged in a kitchen if I need to record something is kind of staggering. So yeah, think about that.
There you go, Bill.
Also, think about aerosolized particles. If you're doing live cooking, then all sorts of things are on stoves bubbling and frying and things like that. Putting neutral glass things in front of your lens on cameras, your microphones, encasing them in something. There's a common kind of prophylactic that people use on these in professional circumstances to make sure that nothing gets into the microphones. So just pay attention to that. Over the course of time, kitchens are relatively dirty environments, and you want to make sure everything is as protected from that as possible if you want it to last a long time.
And Alex, are you actually cooking or just talking in the kitchen?
No, we're going to be having drinks and talking. There's no cooking there. And as far that's okay. No, you made some good points there. As far as the sound, I mean, I have acoustic treatment everywhere. I've got acoustic panels in the kitchen too, so it's absolutely silent, and my fridge isn't that loud.
That's great. Yeah, because I was going to say that one thing about kitchens oftentimes is that they, because you want to be able to clean them, they tend to have a lot of hard surfaces. So it's something that becomes a little bit of a challenge there. The other thing to look at is lots of small lights that you can use to highlight things. The kitchen has lots of crevices, and so a lot of that, what makes it rich when we're there makes it kind of just gets lost in the background. And so even if you can't see it very clearly, little lights that kind of pick up some of the details that are in the kitchen, I think would make a big difference. So yeah, it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see it. Next question.
Vic Sinise in Lowell, in Indiana, it looks like. I'm looking to upgrade my camera for streaming. I currently use Canon's HFG10. I'm looking at the Sony ZV-1F. Any thoughts?
Currently, the jury's out on the ZV-1F. There's a lot of people that are excited about it. This is the new Sony that came out. It's about $2,200, full frame sensor. There are some reports that it heats up. And so that the heat might be, and Sony's had a little bit of trouble with this in the past, leaving it on for a long period of time may not be something that it's built for. So I think that I would think about, think about that process. I don't think I would buy it yet. I think I'd wait to see how it works for folks. I think that there are other ones that if you're willing to spend a little bit more money, I'm on an FX30, Sony FX30, and really happy with that one. I think that, and that's a little less expensive, and also it's a Super 35, not a full frame sensor, but still get a pretty good bokeh out of it, with a fast lens. So I think that you can look at that. A lot of us have been still very happy. The reason some of us have moved to Sony's is because of the autofocus, but when I'm doing multi-camera, I would still use the Blackmagic 6Ks because I can shade them all. So getting them all shaded together and working together, I think, is still a huge advantage over a lot of other things there. It's really tricky to try to match all the cameras when you don't have central shading. So really think about that as you move forward there. Of course, you can start spending a little bit more money with the FX3 and the FX6. Those start to move up. So you just got to decide what your price point is. I would not buy anything before NAB. So we're seeing the announcements starting to roll out. We saw Maxon do an announcement. Sony's doing announcements. Other people are doing announcements. You definitely don't. We're definitely in the zone of don't buy any new cameras until you see what is released at NAB. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Peter Belvin in Houston. Could the techniques shown here, and he's got a link there to a YouTube video that is about controlling multiple Insta360 Link cameras, and he notes a single link is shown being pan, tilt, zoom controlled.
Yeah, there is control. There's UVC that will let you do basic control over the camera, but it won't let you take full advantage of the camera. So there's definitely UVC controls that will let you do some of the link controls. It's just that you lose a lot of what makes that camera the camera by using the simple UVC controls there. So it's definitely doable. What we really want is a full API that lets us dig into all the features of that camera and expose them out to something that we can control. But it's a good start. Next question.
Alexander Knight, British Columbia, Vancouver. Here on the panel, my Apple Cinema displays are highly reflective and they're very old. I looked into monitor hoods to reduce this issue with my studio lights, but they're expensive. I suppose it's time to replace them.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, interestingly enough, that at its day, it was state of the art, but boy, the art has moved on substantially since then, even to the point where Apple has spent a lot of marketing muscle trying to understand this idea of display reflectivity. Of course, they're making billions of screens for iPhones and iPads and the rest of these kind of things over the course of the last 15 years. And the technology has increased so much that I really wouldn't go back to those old cinema displays. Don't get me wrong, I had one for probably 10 years, and I loved the look of it, and it really surprised me when it first came out. But the textured coatings that they're putting on their displays now make them far less reflective. I just think they've moved on, and I think I would suggest you go in the direction of something new if you can.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, a relative talked about drone photography, videography as a marketable skill. The Pilot Institute online course teaches the FAA 107 license, but would this course be good for the photography and video side?
I think the FAA license is just saying what the laws are and you're not going to break them. so they're not. There's not a photography course there. I think that the only way to get really good with drone work is to do lots of drone work. So you really have to be ready to spend time. Because the cost of entry is not very high. There's a fair number of people with licenses for the basic FAA license. And a lot of them are doing a fair bit of work. So you want to think about what that niche is. I think it's maybe a marketable skill, but I think that the market is pretty saturated. Like having the license is table stakes. I can't hire someone without the license. But at the same time, what I'm looking for is a demo reel of all the things someone's done and the kind of shots. And I'm looking for highly technical shots. I can shoot regular shots, so I'm looking for highly technical shots going through things, around things. Really cinematic views, that type of thing. Go ahead, Bill.
We just went out in the marketplace. We have an event coming up, I think, in a month and a half that takes place on the USS Midway, which is docked in San Diego. It has to do with the Girl Scouts. So it's a big charity thing. And they suggested, okay, it's in about 2 months. Can we fly a drone over it and get an overhead shot? And so I talked to one of my friends who is a licensed drone pilot, and he says, nope, you don't have enough time. If there's a couple of classes of these licenses. One is the temporary, I'm pulling a permit, and sometimes it takes as much as 90 days to get that waiver if you're going to fly in any kind of controlled airspace. And cities have a lot of controlled airspaces up there. And she said the one thing that you can do is find somebody who has a permanent certification and they maintain their license constantly, as opposed to the people who have drones and get waivers for a specific flight if it's not in the middle of nowhere. So we ran into that and had to go back to the client and say, I'm sorry, you either pay this for somebody who does this all the time and maintains the permanent waiver, or If you're going out into the less expensive, more job by job market, you don't have enough time. You got to go 90 days out or more.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, the 107 license really just means you know how to read an air map and you know the basic rules of flight. What it does not mean is that you know anything about drone cinematography, which is its own completely separate course. A good friend of mine runs one of these at droneu.com. There are a lot of places you can get this, but no, the FAA by itself won't teach you how to shoot.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that I think I've seen some people get into that has been not necessarily profitable, but a great way to practice is they get the license and they do a lot of real estate. And so they do a lot of real estate flyovers of, you know, more expensive houses and even inside the houses with some of the more protected pieces there. It's kind of a constant business, doesn't pay very well, but you get paid to get a lot of practice. You put a lot of flight hours in and you get used to how your drone works and so on and so forth. And you can build cinematic shots, you know, of someone's house. And so they went from being something that was really special to any house. Just about every house I see now over about $1.5 to $2 million, which in California is pretty common, has some kind of drone shot related to it. So it's because they're really trying. That's kind of gives people a sense of it, so to speak. Next question.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado says, "What are the audio abilities of the USDZ format?"
Go ahead, Jason.
None that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can save USDZ. I don't know if you can save USDZ software in there. I think it. Yeah, I don't think that there's an. I don't think the format has any audio component. Now, a lot of tools have that. So if you're in a gaming application, and I think even if you're in some of Apple's formats, you can save out a project file that knows where those objects are, and then emits their effects, you know, in surround and so on and so forth, or immersive. So it knows where they are in relationship to the person that's in them. But I don't think that the format itself carries any audio. Next question.
Steve Podmore in London says, "My 2019 16-inch 2.4 gigahertz 8-core Intel Core i9 Mac crashes every time I plug my Atem Mini Pro ISO via HDMI into USB 3. He's running Ventura 13.3. Any ideas?"
Go ahead, Jason.
Wait, via HDMI into USB 3? I don't think that's the way that it's supposed to go.
It's to use it. I think that it's. I think crashes every time. I think what he's doing. I mean, I don't know for sure. I think what he's doing is doing an HDMI output from one of the USB 3s into the, you know, into the switcher so that he can use it as a monitor. I think that's what he's working on there. But I don't think that. Like I have one of my outputs from my Mac Studio is one of my outputs from the Mac Studio is a USB to HDMI to one of the inputs on my switcher, so that I can show things if I want to from the system. So I think that's what he may be talking about. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just wanted to double down on what Chris Fenwick brought up when we were trying to diagnose my audio versus video delay. Everything affects everything. So to try to figure out, is it a one thing in a complex system like you're trying to do with complex patching? In my case, it turned out that I was just too close to the top end of memory utilization, and that stopping the processing of a couple of things in the background, particularly my notepads, gave it enough headroom to run successfully without that sync delay being a major issue. Now, at first I thought, well, it's because of the app that I was running, Notepad. But then I had one little instance where I hadn't shut down some other programs before the show. And sure enough, that memory got full again, and I had a few more minor problems with sync. So even what I thought it was when we diagnosed it, it wasn't so much the specific thing that I was running, it was how it was interacting with everything on my computer. And I would just say that, Steve, to go through this and figure out what's really causing it, you really want to do a wholesale look through your entire system and see with as many testing things as you can, Activity Monitor and other things if you're on a Mac, to figure out what's the whole profile of the machine running. And it might be crashing because of something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, interesting puzzle there. Quick reminder again that this is a great time to ask questions. So if you have any questions for the first hour, and especially if you have questions for the second hour, go ahead and throw those in, and make sure to vote on those questions so we know what order you'd like to hear them. Next question.
Vic Hernandez, Springfield, Missouri, looking to familiarize myself with 3D printing. Any recommendations for a 3D printer with a $300 US cap?
I think that the Prusa as well as the 3D Ender are probably good ones under $300. I think Prusa makes one that is under $300, I believe. And the other one that we see a lot is the Ender. Is the other one that is most people I know who are doing stuff under $300 are using. Go ahead, Jason.
Those are solid choices. Has anyone ever tried mono prices? I haven't, but I've looked at it more than once.
Haven't tried it. Yeah, the Creality, by the way, is one that makes the Ender. Both of those are kind of open printers, and so they don't have any enclosure. I have a Qidi, Qidi, which I'm really happy with, but it was a bit more. It was probably $800, not a $300 unit. And I have a cat. so I don't think that I think that the cat would, so if you have cats, I don't know if I would necessarily leave it on open-ended printer. So think about the enclosure as well. And all of these are going to be PLA, so they're not going to be. There's a couple you want to look at those, and it's probably time for us to have another discussion about 3D printers as a second hour. So someone should put that into the suggestions, and we'll try to get that in there. So because a lot of it has moved a lot since the last time we talked about it. Next question.
Rob Harris Sr. in St. Paul, Minnesota is up next. Maybe also for the $1,000 studio discussion. What's a good, reasonably priced in-ear monitor? Looking for comfort for small ear canals. My in-ears hurt even when using the smallest tips.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I actually don't think that the ones that I have would necessarily be the best solution there. Because mine are I have one of the Linsouls. Linsoul's the distributor anyway, the SC10s, and I don't think that they would necessarily be great for a really small canal. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the other option, and I don't know if there are a lot of them out there, but these security monitors that are reasonably high end, they cost like $150 up. The tips in there are microscopic.
I lost you, Bill.
These are bumblebees and things like that. Sorry about that. Those little tiny tips are so small that they really don't cause that same kind of discomfort. I did notice after using these daily for 3 or 4 or 5 months, I would get a little irritation, and I just had to make sure they were scrupulously clean. So just make sure that you take care of your ear hygiene, whatever you're using to stick in your ears, if you do it every day.
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, to find reasonably priced, they're on sale right now. The ones that I would recommend are the Westone Audio X30s. They're on sale at B&H for $279.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, the in-ears, which are like the ones that Bill was talking about, I don't think they're this. I think these are a lower price brand, but they're about $150, and they are very small.
Yeah, and the Linsouls that I have are not super small. They're small, but they're not super small. They're $50, and that's what I use for the show every day, and they seem to work out pretty well for me. You can look at audio implements. Audio implements they're kind of the standard for IFBs. So they are, I think they're out of Wisconsin, and you feel like you're calling the CIA because they don't give you any information. They're like, what do you like, hello? And you're like, I would like a 128 and a 135. And they're like, do you need that today? And you're like, yes. And then they send it to you. So, but they may have gotten better, but when we've ordered hundreds of them. This is what every broadcaster uses. And what they do is they come with a little set of earpieces, and some of those earpieces get super small. And I know that we've had to, for a handful of talent with really small ear canals, we've had to use those specific ones, and they are they're hard coated. They're not soft, and but they're maybe a couple millimeters thick, and they'll go in. And there's been a handful of people that have needed those, so you might want to take a look at that as well. Another thing to do, again, if you are it may not be as inexperienced. Cheap, but you can also get we talked about it earlier this week, or maybe last week. You can get an in-ear mold. So if you're really having trouble getting it to fit, it may be more expensive, but you could have a mold of your ear that's going to match your ear. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and Alex, does Audio Implements, do they make ones that are high fidelity but are very discreet? No.
No, it's not high fidelity. It's really designed just to hear other people talking. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Joe Andrews in Lebanon, Oregon. Any recommendations for live Q&A platforms for in-person classroom-style presentations? Currently using Slido.com and printing full-sheet Q&R codes for the audience to scan and contribute. It works, but are there any other options the panel recommends?
Slido is probably the one that's the most popular right now. I mean, I think it's pretty limited, but it's it's what's out there. I don't know of a lot of other standalone Q&A platforms. I'm actually using. It's funny, Mukana, which you typed into here, is something that we developed. The first use of it was actually for in-room experiences, and I'm actually going to be using it at NAB from all of my conference. I'm speaking like 6 times at NAB, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. So I'll let you know how it goes. We haven't used it that way for a long time, but I've decided since I'm speaking, I'm going to test it. So in the room, I'm just going to say, hey, here's the QR code. Pick it up, and you can start to chat and ask questions, and we're going to see how that goes. So I'll let you know how that works. We haven't used it for in room for a long time, but we're going to give it a shot. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Jason mentioned that an Apple Silicon Mac would deliver lower audio latencies than an Intel Mac. In a live environment, especially with a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air, wouldn't overheating be a real risk, especially in a club or for festival kind of settings?
Go, Jason.
I've been on stage for 1,000 of these, and I understand why you would think that, but it's really not the case. So you'll never see a DJ on stage with a laptop without a massive piece of aluminum like this. And this really serves as a huge heat sink and really channels heat away. So no, I have never seen it be an issue.
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. What's the deal with autofocus lens drive specs? When it claims fast 240 frames per second for autofocus, how exactly does that work?
Can you explain what you're talking about specifically, Alex?
Well, that Panasonic lens I was looking at earlier, it said that it has a fast drive motor, and it quoted 240 frames per second. I'm not sure how that works with autofocus, though.
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with just how fast it can. What they're trying to talk about is the fact that it's making a decision about whether it's in focus, and at 240 frames, it's making that what you want to think about there is that if you're shooting 30 frames a second, you've got these 30 frames a second, and what it's saying is it's making a decision 8 times between every frame about whether you're in focus, right? So it has all these subsamples. So by it's oversampling. If it made that decision at 30 frames a second or at 60 frames a second, then the problem is that you'd see it going in and out of focus. It has to oversample that. Now, whether that's marketing or not, it does have to do that. I mean, all autofocus has to not all of them, but it definitely is much more efficient if it's doing it. Like, for instance, I'm not sure that the Blackmagic does it any faster than the frame rate that it's shooting at. So when you push it, you'll see it kind of go in and out and do its thing. But when for the more advanced autofocus, you are going to see this oversampling that happens. And oversampling is something we use in motion capture. It's something we use in a lot of other things because it any kind of errata. So if you think about, if you're only sampling here, if something is going in and out, it can blend what it sees for every frame because the errata can be averaged out because it has more data to manage. So I think that the 240 frames is great. I think that makes a big difference to oversample the video. Next question.
Aaron Giancarelli in Flagstaff, Arizona says, slow to Mimo Live. Is there after-hours training happening or already recorded for this software?
We are going to do some more stuff after NAB. So we're kind of focused on NAB at the moment, but after NAB, we're going to do some more work. In the early days of office hours, we actually had everybody get they were able to get a version of it that lasted for, I think, 90 days. And we may do something like that. I don't know if it'll be 90 days, but it'll be something where a lot of us can use it for a little while. And then I think Oliver's going to come in and work with folks on it. And so we can all kind of learn a little bit together. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
Jack Ruppel, Breckenridge, Colorado. Camera 360 Link, Hero 10 Black, iPhone with Atem Mini Pro, YouTube and Zoom 1, Face Cam 1, Document Cam 1, Overview Cam. Which would you use where? And he also has Apple TV and Stream Deck Plus.
So many. So many options here. I think that, again, if you have the Atem Mini, you have to decide what are the 4 things that you would do. I think a lot of times what we're, I don't know if you need an overhead cam and a document cam, but what I would do is definitely look at you want one camera on yourself. You want one camera usually coming from your computer so that you can output a computer output that you can cut to. Then you want another camera that potentially is an overhead that's a close up to show what you're showing there. Those are the big three. And now I save another one so that I can do this. So I have one input that I want to have so that I can do a telestrator input, whether that's, whatever software you're using, you want something you can key over top of that. So that's how I would use up 4. I have to admit that I've been using Extreme for a while, so I'm used a couple more inputs. But when I was using 4 mostly, that's how I approach that. Next question.
Morgan Price, Victoria, British Columbia. Last minute question. Any recommendations for a small leveling plate to mount under a 12-inch teleprompter? I'd like to use something other than a large fluid head, and I'm mounting to a stand, not a tripod. Should be less than 20 pounds with camera, lens, and everything else.
Go ahead, Jason.
Just so I understand this, is this about leveling the teleprompter or leveling the camera? Do you have any idea?
I think it's leveling the camera, well, with the teleprompter, right?
So yeah, you can do it either way, I suppose. As far as leveling the teleprompter, I've always done that on Rails, and that's going to break your weight limit. Generally, I have what looks like a Z plate that expands up like this, along 3 axes, and it goes into a normal quarter 20, and it allows me to move the camera ever so slightly on and off axis. Maybe Bill has a better idea.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just saying you can get a 75 millimeter ball head adapter that goes on what's called a hi-hat. Hi-hat are those really small tripods. They can be as small as 5 or 6 inches over something. So if you put a 75 millimeter ball head, the smaller of the two, ball heads usually come in 75 and 100 millimeter, you could probably get something low on a desktop and still have the ability to loosen, straighten up, and lock down your camera teleprompter rig, and that would probably work. Maybe look at Marketech and some of those other companies like that.
Yeah, depending on how big you need it to be. This is a let's see if I can put this up here. This is a Benro, and what this does is that you can move it around. Now this piece on the top is a quick release, so this is not part of the tripod. It's just, in fact, I can probably take it. I don't know if I can take it off and quickly. Anyway, so this piece down below here is on a ball, and it just will simply move around like this. So you can't do it all the way, but you can get quite a few degrees. Now what I have up here is this is a quick release, so that I can just drop the camera onto it and it'll just snap in without me having to tighten anything. So if I have it, let's see if I have it. Oh, I just loosened it up here. I'm not gonna be able to do it live. So anyway, here we go. So what I have here, just so you can see this here. So let me get my eyes out of the way there. So this is a little receiver that has these little ball joints here. So I can take, this is attached to my camera. You can see that it goes in here. And then basically I can just snap it in, and it will, except when I'm live, and it'll just, let's open it up for a receive. Anyway, so usually it works, except when I'm trying to do this live. But now I can pull it off. Hold on, so this is the actual piece that we're looking at here. So this is just the piece that might work for you. There's a couple of these. They're $200 or $300 to get a good one, but they do work. A hi-hat, to what Bill said, in what you're looking for is a receiver. So you can also get just a head, and you're looking for a 100 millimeter or 75 millimeter receiver that you can attach to almost anything. A hi-hat is one of the options. Go ahead, Jason.
I found it. If you look on Amazon for the Universal Flex Tilt Head Z-mount bracket, Arca Swiss tripod, quick head release, they're clearly just searching for, whatever you're going to be going in. VIKII is the name of the manufacturer, or at least the Amazon seller.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
And then you didn't say how you were going to mount all this, so that if you're mounting it on a desk, I'll show you what I've done. And that is right here. I use that plate that's on your right, and I mount a Glide Gear teleprompter on that. It's an 11-inch monitor, the Lilliput monitor, and a Blackmagic 6K camera on that plate, and it holds up just fine.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, Alex, you said you predict once the fire dies down that Waves will be going back to the subscription-first model. If your studio was based around the SoundGrid platform, would you be looking to migrate to a network platform not locked to a single vendor?
Well, I think that over time, Waves will try to move to a subscription model. I don't think they're going to try to move anybody that's already there. I think that what they learned was trying to move the people that were existing was probably a bad idea. But having new purchases, I think right now they're going to give you both options. And then I think what's going to happen is you can't get a new one. You can keep on, they're going to, I think that they were very surprised at what happened. And so I think that they backed away and tried to put the fire out as fast as they could. The subscription is good for some people. It's not good for everybody. Definitely not good for the people who are complaining. So I think that what they're going to do is they're going to back away. They're not going to do anything for a little while. They're just going to let the dust settle. But I think that then there's going to be some point where they announce that, hey, if you're an already existing user, you can keep on upgrading. We're going to keep on supporting that. Nothing's going to change in your world. If you want to buy new licenses, they're all going to be in subscription. They're not doing that right now, but I think that's what they're going to do. And that way they can slowly migrate people to new versions and keep the folks with the current versions from, pulling out the pitchforks. Next question. Can't hear you, Bill. Oh, we lost Bill, I think. Bill is frozen. There we go. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Oh, okay. Douglas Carmichael. Jason, I recognize the 12 South stand you were holding. Would the Curve Flex be as beneficial as the older model you have? How stable would it be? And he's got a link there to the 12 South Curve Flex.
Good, Jason.
So as far as beneficial is concerned, no. I mean, the 12 South stand is designed to look exceptionally pretty and lift the MacBook extremely high. It's not going to have the same thermodynamics. But again, with respect to audio, I think you're worried about something that doesn't truly exist on the M1. It is a different class of device, and it's just not going to cause this issue.
Yeah, and the one that I use is made by, let's see if it's made by, I always want to say Broken. Broken is the name of it, but it's a BROCOON, Broken. And it folds up really nicely. So does the 12 South, but that one we buy them for a lot of them, and it folds up into almost nothing. And I can put it in my backpack, and it's been pretty successful for me. So we buy a lot of those as well. Oh, good, Bill.
Yeah, I have one. The one that I use every day here on the show is from Rain Designs. Whoops, it didn't come up. So there may be that may be some video thing. Rain Design Level 2 stand. It's $54. It's not that expensive. The thing I like about it is it has a little slider on the front, and you can tilt it at different directions. When I'm here at my desk, I have a fixed angle, but often I take that out on the field with me for the thermal properties of coupling the back of my laptop with a heat sink, just as Jason suggests. And I like the fact that if I'm at a standing desk or something like that, working in the field, I can change that angle, and it's real useful. So for $50, it's worth it.
It's great. We're now going to change subjects to our second hour and talk about the $1,000 studio. A lot of people, when we said this, they say like, well, we really need a $10,000 studio. We're like, we can do things for $1,000. Like we can do things for a small amount. And you may not find that this is also, when we talk about this discussion, you may find that there are bits and pieces of this that are interesting. So we're going to talk about cost-effective parts of the model. Now, one thing I want to lay down as a ground rule is that we're not going to calculate the cost of the computer. So we're going to assume that you have a laptop, that you have a Mac Mini or a PC or something like that. We're going to assume that is there, because otherwise, you use up most of it just to have that. Now, when we can talk about other things when we get to the larger studios. And again, this is the beginning of a discussion. So that we're going to start with $1,000. I think the next one is going to be $10,000. Next one's $25,000. Next one's probably $50,000. We'll probably do these about once a month or once every 6 to 8 weeks. And we're trying to figure that out. It depends on how popular this one is today. And so if you ask a lot of questions, then we'll do them every month. If you don't ask any questions, we'll do them once a year. so it's up to you as the producers to decide how we do this, and as the panelists. But anyway, I think that what we want to do is really look at what do we really need that really bumps this up. And one of the things that when people ask me, what the what are the hierarchies that I pay attention to? The first one is internet connection. Like I want an Ethernet cable to someone's, connection that is at least 10 megs a second. So that if we're doing this type of thing. The second thing I want to worry about is audio. I want to worry about what is the sound of their audio, and that's audio treatment as well as an audio mic. Sometimes the mic is there to get rid of a lot of that. The next one is actually lighting. People will think it's camera, but you can make up for a lot of bad cameras with good lighting. So how do we manage that lighting? The next one is camera. And the final one is what's behind people, and so those are the things that's like the hierarchy of needs that I think that a lot of times I'm trying to solve. So we can talk through those, how we solve some of those needs and how we do it as effectively as possible and cost effectively as possible because we don't have a lot of money to spend. Yeah, go ahead, John.
After I read my list, you might as well just end the show because I have the perfect $1,000 studio. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Lay it on us.
Insta360, $300. Heil PR40, $300. You can find them on the used market for $300. Interface Yamaha AG3. It has enough gain to drive the Heil PR40, and 3 lights, $200, right at $1,000.
There you go. All right, Jason.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't even know what we're going to spend the next 59 minutes on, but it just
John just answered it, so it's like it's over.
There it is. Great.
Thanks,
way
everybody.
To unbury
Welcome.
the
Thanks.
lead.
Tomorrow we'll talk about education. Go ahead, Jason.
So conceptually, I feel like this is really a wrestle for audio. I think it's safe to assume that most computers have a webcam, and if you're going to save money, Alex is absolutely right. If you light a bad camera, you're going to end up with a better image than if you try to clean up a bad mic. I mean, that's just straight up always the case. And audio, more importantly, matters more than video. So to that end, the way I see any studio that, if we try a $1,200 studio and we end up with issues, you drop the camera and you just, you put a big floodlight in there and then see what you can get away with respect to audio.
You go, Tom.
Well, John did a pretty good job, but I don't know that the Heil PR40 makes a good handheld microphone. So we've got other considerations to throw in. We've got to think about what we're going to use for mic stands, earphones. There's more to this. So I'm sure we've still got a little bit of the hour to fill in.
Yeah, and I think it depends on, there's a lot of, thinking through, when you talk about lights, these kinds of things can, lights can add up to a lot. They can start to really push your budget a fair bit. And it depends on how fluid and how flexible a lot of times you want these to be. So I guess for me, and I don't know if this is the final version, we have really leaned into the MV7s, the Shure MV7s, mostly because they don't require any kind of interface. They're just a USB in. If I want to add an interface, I can. So those MV7s have become pretty useful for us, and they're relatively simple. Now, we are looking at some of the Rhodes and some of the other things that are at $250. If it's my home studio, because some of this is also what do we send out to other people. If we're sending something out, we want an MV7 because it's simple, it's easy, it's hard to fix. We are looking at some of the Rhodes solution and some of the other bits and pieces for to give us more control inside of that process. So that's another thing. I will say we're still pretty happy with the Insta360s, the Insta360 links, although we're looking at the OBSBOT specifically because of the OSC control. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, I was just going to give my recommendation for under $1,000. So starting with the audio stuff, I was just looking at this today. I guess I have to quote US dollars because a lot of people here are in the US. The Lewitt Connect 6 is a 2 mic preamp audio interface with over 70 dB of gain with onboard processing. So if you're going to use a low output dynamic mic, that's a good starter. And then you can get a Shure MV7X for under $200. Under $200. That's the XLR version only of that microphone. You can get a pair of closed back headphones for about $100, and then by the time you add Insta360 Link and like a Godox 260C bicolor LED panel, which is about $90 US, and then mic stand, miscellaneous cables, you should be able to get that just a hair under $1,000.
Can you repeat that interface? I'm not familiar with it.
This is the Lewitt. They're known for microphones. They came out
Lewitt.
with
Sorry, yeah, Lewitt.
Yeah.
And you said
this
it's
is
X.
the Connect 6 interface.
Connect 6. Oh, okay, got it. And it's about $300.
About $300 US.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, have not used that. And you've used that a lot?
I have tested it, and it sounds really nice, and the app controls really great. It's got built-in loopback as well, so you got all your routing. You can live stream with it as well, and it's pretty solid.
Yeah,
Looks weird though.
Yeah, it does look weird. Go ahead, Bill.
I think that the first thing you got to do, if you're really trying to save money, is think about what you already have. You may not have a lot of things, but you may have some things that could be useful. For example, if you're in the Mac ecosystem and you have a laptop and a phone, you also could consider doing the phone as your camera. Apple announced a way to do that through a thing called continuity camera. Then your biggest challenge is getting audio in. And both Alex and I have looked at the Ceramonics unit, which will take a lightning connector out, allow an XLR mic into the Ceramonic unit, and feed that via lightning into your system for broadcast. So that would allow you to use an inexpensive dynamic mic, or even a mic that requires phantom power, one of the condensers that are out there, to up your audio game, and would be a pretty simple thing, leaving you more room to deal with things like small LED lighting panels that you could use to get 3-point lighting done to make yourself look better in circumstances, and the other miscellaneous tripods and things like that. So I just suggest take a look at what you do have already before you say, I have to buy every single piece of this. It's just another approach.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
We haven't talked specifically about lighting yet, and I use the Nanlite 2 6Cs. They're about $90 a piece.
Yeah, those are, and I have a lot of those. So we use them for a lot of our smaller kits. These are the Nanlite. You said there's 6. I'm using the 6C. Is that what you're talking? You're using 2 of those? Is that what you said? Yeah. And can't hear you, Tom. Can't hear you, Tom.
Oops. It's the Nanlite 2 6C.
Nanlite 2. It's the second version?
It's got a double I, after it.
Oh, 6C2 or 6CII or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever.
Yeah. Got it. So, and so I think that those, I have the originals and we've used them a lot. That's what I use on the road, and they aren't very expensive, and they make a lot of different ones. Nanlite makes a lot of different lengths that are there, but those fit in. I fit them into they're magnetic, and so you can stack them together. And so I'll snap 4 of them into my 4 of them together, and it does look like a bunch of sticks of dynamite in my bag. So I think I get people look at it pretty often, but it's sitting in there, and I can throw it into my bag, and then I have some lighting for the background as well as lighting for me. So I'll usually have 2 of them for me and then 2 of them for my background. So those are, they've been pretty efficient related to that. I do think that, I will say that what we focus on when people ask us, and Tom's going to show how these snap together, I think, or you're just going to show one of them or 2 of them. You got 1. Yeah. That's what the 6C looks like. I will say that, Alex is posted in the back end here, and maybe we can get some of those up forward as well. For the mics, if you're looking at what to mount the mic on, I do think that from a cost-effective perspective, the Elgato low profile mic is a good one. We use that in the office, and so it's a low profile. It's kind of like the one I have here. This one's a lot more expensive. So, but this one here is I'm using the OC White version of this low profile, and this one will fit into the next version of the Studio that we talk about, but not this one. But with the low profile doesn't have quite as much dexterity as the one that I'm using, but it definitely works well. And it just attaches to a desk. I will say there are some things when you're thinking about the Studio, and especially if you're thinking about saving money, is the thing that makes the most difference in your Studio is your audio quality. So you just really want to, if you're going to spend money, for a little bit of money, spend it on getting a good mic. And again, the MV7 I think is a pretty solid mic to make that happen. And then make sure that it's easy to move around. So when you have a mic that is on a table stand, so like getting something, it's worth, you might go, well, it's $100 instead of $12 to get the mic, a mic arm. But having a mic arm means you can move it around. You can get it to exactly where it belongs, and you're not kind of leaning in and having some not good setups for you. So I think that it's really important, if you can, to have that flexible mic movement. I'm not a big fan of the regular mic stand that comes down. Most of us have moved to low profile mic stand. So you have a standard mic stand, which is a lot less expensive, kind of comes up and you'll see it coming down next to somebody, and it's now covering this up, and it means that it's harder for you to see your monitors, and there's a whole bunch of things about it doesn't work. So what we a lot of us prefer is some version of a low profile. Again, the stand works okay, except you got to figure out where on your desk you're going to set it, and you're also going to get a lot of desk noise. One of the other tricks that I do with the low profile is my low profile is connected to a desk that's sitting next to me. So it's not the desk that I'm on. So I can hit my desk all day long, and you're not going to hear any thumps. It's also in a shock mount, so you're not going to hear anything through that. So that's another thing to kind of consider there. Go ahead, Jason.
I just wanted to show that a little bit more plainly. So this kind of a mic that will let you to move stuff over is so much better than a scissor that it's kind of hard to understate. And the Elgato, I'm totally with you, Alex, is for a long time I really liked the Heil scissor, and until it just started to annoy me, until I realized that there was an alternative, and until I found the OC White.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, there's a few other interfaces that are a little bit less than the Lewitt Connect 6 that I mentioned too. So if you're on a bit of a tighter budget, the Audient ID4 is an excellent sounding mic preamp single channel interface, and also the new Universal Audio Volt 1. I'll post links there. Those are good options.
Yeah, it's great. And again, at the $1,000 range, I would probably still lean towards, once I go over that, I'm going to lean towards an audio interface. Under that, I would really think hard about getting a mic. The one thing when you buy the mic is that you want to think about a USB connection as well as an XLR connection, because that gives you upward mobility. So if you buy something that has only USB, you're stuck with that forever. If you buy one with a USB and XLR, and again, that's why we use the MV7, is that gives us the ability to, it's really easy to plug in. I don't need another interface, or I have an XLR. I can plug it into a larger mixer and make that work as well. And so that is something to kind of consider as you go down that path. But do think about when we get less expensive interfaces. A lot of times, the other thing we're giving up is the preamp. So the preamp isn't quite as strong. But I would definitely budget when you're thinking about your kit. I would definitely budget up to $300 for your mic and up to $300 for your camera. So that you really, those are the two things that I would fix the first under $1,000, and then I would. Then again, these lights, there's a lot of LED lights the Godox, the newer lights are all in this range. If you're ready to spend a little bit more money, what I use in kits a lot are those 6Cs when they need to be small. Nanlite also makes some LumaPads, and then as I get larger, I look at the 68Bs. We have a lot of 68Bs that we use, and they're a little bit more expensive. They're $250 per light, so that's going to start to get more expensive there, but it definitely makes a big difference. Go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say a recent discovery from my test, because I know a lot of people seem to be having problems with plosives talking very closely on the MV7. The Shure makes what they call the larger close talk pop filter for the SM7B, which is, I'm posting a link here. The part number is A7WS. I tested it this week, and it does fit on the MV7 snugly. So it's much, much thicker. So if you're having plosive issues and you need to have that mic close to you, try that.
The other thing that you can get for about $14 or maybe $11 now is this pop filter. This pop filter is actually designed for the MV7. And so it actually attaches to the little arm that is at the bottom of the MV7. And we're now going to we're testing these, and you'll see it today. We put them on both the mics to get rid of it. And it's worked really well so far. And so we're probably going to attach these to all of our mics, all of our MV7s, where you have the pad and then you have this just in front of it. It'll eliminate me having to filter out all those pops later. So I think that's also, but a pop filter does make a difference as you go through. The other thing to look at that we're not going to talk about too much today, but another thing to think about is that, for me, I have a grid that sits above me, and that may not fit into your $1,000 thing, but it doesn't have to be much more than that. I'm using what's called Maker Pipe, which is the Maker Pipe is it's small fittings that you buy that you can just use with EMT rail. And so the EMT rail isn't very expensive. So you might be a couple $100 into it before you have like being able to build a whole little grid that hangs down. Like for instance, the lighting that I have here is not I might have it easy to find here, but the lighting that I have here is not, it's not the direct lighting. I built a little diffuser that's about 5 feet by, it's about 5 feet by 3 feet, that's there with Maker Pipe and about $10 worth of diffusion cloth. So it's not something that I spent a lot of, I could have tried to buy a big light, but I've got a couple smaller lights behind it, just kind of filling it out. So I've got a nice big diffuse lighting that is something. So you can also think about how to do that again without spending an incredible amount of money. There's a lot of ways for you to figure that out. And I'm trying to see if I can load that up real quickly. Anyway, so think about ways to use that. Again, things like Maker Pipe allow you to build a little bit of a rig. I hang from that Maker Pipe. I also hang. I've got maybe $100 worth of moving blankets. So I bought them. They're 90-pound moving blankets, and they all hang from here. So again, this may not be the thing you put in your living room, but at the same time, this might be also something that if you're really trying to build a studio and you want it to look normal from one direction, and you're not worried about what it looks like in the other direction, then you may find that this is a worthy thing to kind of consider. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
First one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. Suggestions for 1K studio mic, and he's looking at the Samson GoMic on an Amazon boom arm with an SM81 windscreen. And he notes that all of that is less than $50, and he wonders if anybody can suggest better quality for the cost.
Go ahead, Alexander.
I remember a few months back, Guy came into the show with one of those USB, the Samson GoMics, and it's when you get it close to your mouth, it actually sounds pretty decent for the money.
Yeah, I think it sounds okay. I think that I think we got one and I was testing it, and it tends to top out a little bit, and it's really it's very sensitive to plosives. So it was definitely something that I think I have it sitting around here somewhere. I had this dream that I was going to send them back after I tested them, and I never did. So anyway, so they're all sitting here somewhere. I thought it was okay. I thought that it tended to overmodulate in not a nice way. So if it got too much pressure, you could hear it. It also, I think that when you speak very clearly and carefully, it sounded really good. And I think Guy has a very specific, very methodical way of delivering. And so I think that it worked for him. I do think that, again, what we're always looking for is mics that can be a little bit more flexible, so that you're not thinking about it. The goal, part of when you're building these studios, is part of it is to make it sound great or look great. And you can make a lot of things sound good or look good. But you also want to take into account not having to think about it, that it's just going to work. It's just going to do the thing that it needs to do. And I think that as we get into a lot of the mics that are below $100, and there's plenty of mics that are below $100 that can produce a great sound, you need to pay a lot more attention as a user to the technique. The reason we don't send those out is because of it. Now, if you're willing to put the time in, then you can get a good sound out of it. You do need to be able to hear yourself. And the thing that I worry about is it creates two minds. A lot of times I talk about, two minds when you're on air, you want to do as little thinking as possible. Like you don't want to be thinking about anything other than the content. So a lot of what I think about as I refine my studio is I really try to think about how do I have something. The reason I switched to a Sony camera instead of the Blackmagic camera that I've used for a couple of years was because I found myself leaning forward and back trying to make sure I was in focus. I wanted the short depth of field, but I also wanted to stay in focus, and the Sony took that away. Like I now just am in focus. It doesn't matter where I go. And so that meant that I didn't have two minds to make that actually work. Go ahead, Alex.
I don't know if the budget was $50 for the microphone in total. If you're willing to spend a little bit more, I'm actually really impressed with the SE Electronics Neon USB mic. I've mentioned it a couple times before, but it's not getting a lot of attention, and I don't think there's anyone on the panel that is using one, but it has a very, very nice sounding mic capsule in there. They put a very high quality one in there, and it also has a very high res analog to digital converter. It'll do all the way up to 192. kilobits per second sample rate there. So it'll do a very, very high res conversion if you're going to say you want to record some music, not that you really need to go that high, but it just as a spoken word microphone, it sounds phenomenal.
And I will say, if you're buying a less expensive microphone, I would highly recommend buying them from Amazon. And the reason I'm saying that, I know that you'll think that, if you're more expensive, might go to a sound center and buy them, or buy them from somewhere else. But the return policy on Amazon is so easy nowadays that you want to test a couple mics, figure out what you want, and it's got to be really easy to return. I know that I bought something recently, and the return policy, was like, I was like, oh, that's going to be like, if it doesn't work out, it's a big lift. With Amazon, it's a zero lift. so it's you take it to Whole Foods and drop it off, and so definitely take that into account as you start to buy these mics, because you might want to go through a couple mics and figure this out, as opposed to committing to one. I will say that when you talk about mics, and Bill talks about this a lot, that everybody's voice is different, and a mic sounds really good with some people, doesn't sound good with others. And so you may go through, what you want to do is have the option to go through 2 or 3 mics before you may buy one and go, oh, this is perfect. I mean, there's the Blue Yeti is $70. The Audio Technica 2020 is $80. The Rode Pod mic is $99. Although I will say that we just used the Rode. We had a client that wanted to use the Rode, and it's a lot more sensitive to popping. so those are the things that you have to kind of take into account. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Steve Simmons in Dover, New Jersey. Assuming a mid-level laptop and a blank canvas room with only a $1,000 budget, how should I allocate my spend to get the best possible studio, and what should my priorities be going forward?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, you use this term blank canvas room, and that scares me, and here's why. I have done this kind of work in 5 or 6 different rooms over the last 15 years, some of them highly treated, some of them not treated at all. And when I move into a new place, as we kind of migrated from Arizona over to California, in one case, the room was extraordinarily reflective. We had hardwood floors. They were plaster walls that didn't have any kind of texture on. And in fact, the ceiling had no texture on it. That room was a nightmare, and I had to bring in tons and tons of ameliorating devices. I had big panels flown over the ceiling, big sound absorbing panels like I have here. I had drapes that I hung on rods to make sure I had some kind of absorbive quality on the hard surfaces, just to get within the range of being acceptable. Now, when I moved into this place, it has a popcorn ceiling, a textured ceiling. It has thick carpet below it, and half the stuff I had to use in that former room to get anywhere near decent quality sound in the space, I didn't need to use in this room. So there's a ton of variability with that blank canvas room that to me says you're either going to have to spend money to make it functional, or you can get by with spending very little money to make it equally functional. And it's going to be the nature of the space that you're moving into. You just have to try, listen, put your mic up and see what you got.
Yeah, your mic is the most important part. Your sound is the most important part. Cutting out reflections and getting a good, solid sound is the thing that matters the most. So you want to look at what that investment is going to be required to make that actually happen. And as Bill said, treating the room is the most important thing, in my opinion. Again, the thing that I have, it depends on also how does the rest of the studio need to look. I only have one wall that I need to show you, like here, and believe me, there's no other angle that works. And this was just storage, and I threw a couple things in there to make it look nice. But this was what all my walls have these big shelves, these big U-line shelves that are just full of gear and things and whatever I'm working on there. And so I have one that I just put this other stuff in, but I only have one angle that you need to see. The rest of the angles are moving blankets, around me, to the side, to both sides here. It stops right at where I'm sitting, but this whole area is all moving blankets, and it's a couple C-stands with some, stuff. It might take me over the $1,000 limit, but I don't care how it looks. All I care about is how it sounds. So I'm not trying to impress anybody on the other side of the camera. So that's something you have to decide when you build these things. I don't think at $1,000 you can worry about how it looks. I just don't think you have the money to do that. But I think that you But when you go into a blank room, you're either going to put some stuff on the walls, absorption on the walls. This isn't soundproofing your walls. This is going to be just absorbing reflections. And so a lot of times I'll throw up a bunch of Sonics. I had Sonics that I've carried around from one office to another for 20 years. It's got holes in it the key was Sonics, by the way. Sonics is like a foam that you can get that you see in a lot of radio stations. It is, they'll show you how to put glue on the back. They'll show you, if you watch how to install your Sonics, they'll do this figure S all the way down, this wavy thing, and then they'll put it on the wall. Don't ever do that. Like, don't ever do what they tell you. That's so that you'll buy more Sonics. What you do is just use a staple gun, a good industrial staple gun, and you just staple them into the walls. It does less damage to the walls. It's much easier to fill in the staple holes. And it is, and you can pull them off, and then you just keep stapling them in a slightly different place. And I am proof that you can go to 5 or 6 locations and throw that Sonics up. And I wallpaper the whole place with Sonics, and then I just don't have to worry about a lot of reflections. Sometimes you have to put some bass traps in, other things like that. But I was able to reuse them over and over again. Now this is going to push you over your $1,000 limit, but it looks nicer. When I don't care what it looks like, I'm using kind of wavy, the wavy. Moving, I get mine are what are called U.S. cargo control. They're black and white, so they're white on the inside, black on the other side. Don't get ones with color because they'll affect you. They'll corrupt your color itself. So mine are white on one side, black on the other, so I can do that. And the one thing I will say is if you can find ones with grommets, it's great. But the thicker ones oftentimes don't have grommets, and they're about, because you're looking for about 95 pounds per dozen. So that is the 90 to 95 pounds a dozen is the thickness of the moving blanket. And your moving blankets, sound blankets, they're all the same except they're different branding and different price oftentimes. But you'll be able to, for a couple $100, have enough to cover everything. The only thing is you have to put the grommets in yourself. And I didn't know what they're too thick. They're too thick to use the little staplers. You have to use a hammer. And I didn't know what the inside of my thumb looked like until I was putting grommets into my moving blankets. Go ahead, Jason.
Alex, how far away are your moving blankets? If you reach both of your arms,
no, I'm still 3 feet away from them because I have. So what I did is I built a 10 by 10 foot box. That's because it has to do with you get limited by whatever you have. EMT pipe comes in 10 foot lengths. So the box that I'm in is 10 feet. So it's a 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot box, raised about not quite 10 feet. It's not quite that high. So I just built a box inside of the room that does that. Go ahead, Bill.
So Alex was talking about taming reflections, and I have a step better that I finally figured out I used to have RLX panels, which are very much like the ones Alex is talking about, and they came in about 18-inch by 3-foot panels. So I was trying to figure out how to mount them as I was making a move, and I figured out if I went to the art store and got the thick foam core, not the thin, flimsier stuff, but the like 3/4 of an inch foam core, and mount and cut it. You can cut that stuff with a razor blade and snap it off cleanly. Cut those to the size of your RLX or Sonex or some other kind of panel that you're buying, and then use spray glue. I used 3M77 to mount those to the foam core pieces, and then you can use command strips, which are genius, I think. And just put them in the corners of the regular things. You'll build yourself a little template. And when you go into a new space, just buy command strips and nothing else, and you can slap these things up. They're incredibly light, and they're incredibly effective at stopping reflections. Alex was 100% right. They are not soundproofing. You cannot get any transmission of your sound from this room to the next cut down with these things. But in terms of flutter echo and some of the reverb, it will effectively do that. And I love those because you can just pull them off and take them to the next place and just buy more command strips.
Yeah, and I will say we're fixating on sound because sound is the most important thing. Like just to be clear, like you can get away with a lot of camera stuff, but sound, it comes across differently if you have better sound. It's the thing that drives people crazy when you have bad sound. Next question.
Aaron Giancale of Flagstaff, $1,000 seems like a starter kit. What could you accomplish with this kit?
$1,000 with what we're outlining. Let's say whatever mic. Let's say it's an MV7 with a Link 360, or Insta360 Link. Some relatively good lights, and if you really want to cover your background, a lot of us have used these Manfrotto gray screens that I used for a couple of years on this show. With that, if you put those things together, you're in the top 1%. like of user of people who jump on Zoom. So I just want to make sure you're clear. Like, we play really hard here, but at $1,000, you are, with you could put a gray background behind you if you don't want to clean, if you don't want to put a shelf back there. You can have a couple good lights. You can have a good webcam. You can have a good mic. An Ethernet cable to make sure that you get good connections, and you're in the top 1%. Every meeting that you go into, you have a 90%, well, let me say top 10%, but you have a 90% chance of having the best, the best setup. So when we start talking about the $10,000 one, you're really talking now about a much higher level of, really $10,000 gets us into broadcast level. Like, we are now competing with a broadcast insert stage. At $1,000, if you go every meeting, you will look and sound better than almost everybody else that's there. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I feel like the lie here is that the panelists that you're seeing have $1,000 studio. The truth is, that's not what you should be aiming for if what you have is a webcam and a headset. The goal here is to get you a little bit more off the ground, and it's.
And again, I think that $1,000 get you a lot off the ground. Like, it's like not like a little off the ground. It is, again, better than almost any person that you see in any meeting that you go into in Zoom. Like, and that's the, so you just need to know that at that price, you are moving way up. And then, we're trying to reproduce broadcast. So we're playing a little bit harder. And again, that starts to get into the more expensive version of this, which we'll talk about next. And go ahead, Bill.
One more thing is, we're not really trying to hack your gear so much as we're trying to hack your brain. We're trying to say, these are the things that make a significant difference in how you appear to everybody else on Zoom or whatever. It is thinking about these things. It is thinking about diffusion. It is thinking about your microphone. It is thinking about getting decent lighting on you. Whichever tools, I mean, if you can't afford tool A and have to drop back to half of tool A, the idea behind getting some light on your face so that you pop out of the murk of a room is the key to this. Even if you can't afford the perfect stuff, the techniques are really what makes a difference in this.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, this is all about dress for success. I can't tell you how many meetings that I've been in on Zoom, and the CEO is using his webcam, and I'm practically looking up his nose. We've got to get them to up their game.
Yeah, and I think that life. People hate when people say this, but life is a confidence game. Like life is a confidence game. It is people feeling confident that you can do what you say you're going to do. They feel confident that you know what you're talking about. They feel like you're in control, and that opens up an enormous amount of opportunity for people all the time. And so I think that there is I'm amazed to what I've seen this over and over and over again, to what Tom's talking about, is that people of real authority entering a show with very low quality, or entering a meeting with very low quality. I'm like, did you feel like you could go to a big sales meeting with cutoffs and a t-shirt and some flip-flops? Because people, they would very quickly go, oh, no, people would make a decision about you if you did that. And I think as more of us do what we're doing here, and as more people spend $1,000 on their studio or a little money on their mic, it's going to be more and more problematic for people who are casual about it to show up. And I will admit that once you have a studio, it does get a little constraining. Like, I don't like being in meetings outside of my house. so I will avoid that like the plague. We are building up another studio in the office so that I can be down there more often, and I can, jump into meetings there. But I do find that I'm a little bit constricted there in that realm. Next question.
Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia says, what would you need to change out in the $1,000 studio to make it tinker-free if you were setting up the studio for someone else to use?
I think a lot of the things that we're talking about are pretty tinker-free. I think that the big thing that we do when we start moving to a studio that's going to be tinker-free is to send them a Mac Mini with it. So we get base Mac Mini. We've got a bunch of them laying around to do exactly this. And now we control the Insta360, or we control the audio paths and so on and so forth. So that definitely takes a lot of the work out of it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, also little things like you want to make it easy to use. When I come in every morning to do this, I have 2 switch panels that have master switches on them. I turn those 2 on, all my lights come up, the camera comes up, I'm ready to log into Zoom, and the presets from everything I can load into Zoom. And so in literally about 2 minutes, I can go from nothing's on in this space to ready to make my presence known through Zoom. So those little, make it simple to operate as well designed.
Yeah, and I think that again, if the things you want to do is a low profile arm with on the mic makes a big difference, especially if it's attached to something other than the table. So if you're talking about tinker free, it's not tinker free, but it's really easy for them to move to where they need to go, and having that freedom. So much of life is interface. Your interface drives what you do, and so figuring out a way that it's easy for them to set up, it's easy for them to work through it. The Insta360 is a really good one. You can use the problem with a regular like a Brio, which we used for years, is that you're always trying to reframe and trying to figure things out, and having something where you can ask somebody to just move and frame. And again, it'll stay that way. And you can even set a setting that they just push the button and it'll go back to where it was. So those are things that you can make happen. Other things that you can do with your lights is to attach them to a central. These lights take so little draw that you can get one of those little home kit or material or whatever plugs and plug all your lights into it, and then just simply go, when you walk in or when you hit on your phone or when you tap a button on it, it just lights up everything as well. So you don't have to turn everything on and off as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, for someone already invested in an audio setup, would an Insta360 Link, $299 US, and a Blue Sona mic with a compass arm, US $448, be a solid start to a $1,000 studio?
I think that right now the Insta360 is the one a lot of us have chosen, although again, we're going to be looking a little closer at the OBSBOT as it rolls out because of the OSC control. So we are looking at that one from a growth perspective, but the Insta360 is something a lot of us have used a lot to make this work. The Blue Sona, I haven't used it yet. I really feel like they made it look shiny and they're charging more for it, and I don't know if you're getting any value. I don't know if you're getting any other like value for the money. So I would probably lean back into an MV7, MV7X, some of those things. I would go. I don't know if I'd rather have a low profile Elgato arm with a. I don't like the Elgato mics. I have to admit. I just lent one out to somebody, but I don't think. But the arm is great. Next question.
Brody Brazil in San Francisco says, I'd like to suggest that at least $50, but closer to $100 goes to the acoustic treatment. Agree with everyone who says that audio matters more than video at first.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, let me try to round this out a little bit. There's no such thing as a studio space that doesn't benefit from acoustic treatment. And to that end, it's very hard to think in terms of I've got these big glass reflective surfaces called monitors, and I don't need to treat anything. So it's a hard argument to disagree with.
Yeah, no, I would spend at least $100 on the treatment. Like you're going to figure that out. You're going to put some blankets up. You're going to drop something around to start breaking that information that up. But I think that $50 to $100 or even up to $200 of your budget maybe want to eat up doing that, because it's a subtle reflection that is kind of a bummer, like that you're so close with a good mic and then you still hear just a little bit of reverb. So getting rid of that reverb definitely makes a difference in the intelligibility as well as just how it feels from a quality perspective. Go ahead, Bill.
And also pay attention to where you're locating yourself in the room. Most rooms are boxes, and the 10 by 10, 10 by 12 room, spare bedroom is a typical thing we find ourselves in all the time. I'm in a corner of one of my rooms. That's why behind me you're seeing the other corner. I position myself diagonally rather than square to a wall for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to be able to get behind my equipment for patching circumstances. I found early in my career that building things against walls makes it really hard to change things.
You can always tell someone who does this a lot. I can tell that it's like, tell me that you've done a lot of production without telling me. The table, when you go to set up, the table is always 2 to 3 feet from the wall, and that's how you tell me that you've done this before without telling me. Because I just look at it and go, well, they've done this before. They have some experience, because for the first year, everyone always just pushes it up against the wall, and then they're trying to figure stuff out. But there's some point where you just go, I'm going to leave room so that I can comfortably walk back there and sort things out. It's a funny thing though, because there's just this time, there's some point, a certain number of productions where people just stop doing that.
It's a tell. It's a tell.
It's such a tell. It's such a tell. Like I kid you not, if I walk into a production and you've pushed a portable table up to the wall, I make an assumption that you don't really know what you're doing. Like you're green, you're new, and I'll talk really nicely to you. You'll notice because my eyebrows will go up and I'll be like, "Hey, how's it going? Let's get going here. Let's see what because I've decided like you're a production child." So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So the corner facing into a corner.
How's that wall doing?
So we're gonna pick up this camera now and we're gonna put it over there, and it's like a little like. Little fluffy clouds. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, okay, that hurts.
Wait a second. Let me finish this up real quick, though.
Go ahead,
So by putting it into a corner, I've understood that I'm not directly talking into a flat surface. It's going to reflect on another flat surface. It's going to bounce back to that same flat surface and create an echo that I don't want to get it. Once I'm in a corner, and the more complex reflections can be controlled with drapes and soundproofing and things like that.
Yeah.
But unless you have more space than I do, you want to pay attention to little things like that. Thanks.
If you go at an angle and then you treat two walls, you'll get rid of almost everything. Like that's the reality. Go ahead, Jason. What were you going to say? One more?
Yeah, the way I got rid of reflectivity in this space is that there's 10 feet going that way, and at least 4 feet between that iMac and the wall, and it makes a massive difference.
Yeah. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. Does an Atem Mini make any sense for this budget, since a recommendation for a camera probably would be an Insta360 Link?
Good, Tom.
Well, since you're going to have to convert that USB output on the Insta360 to HDMI and then take it into an Atem Mini, now your budget's gone. You have no room for a microphone. So unless you're going to be a mime, this probably won't work out. So, we're going to probably bring in the Atem Mini on the next show.
Yeah, Alex.
I would look at a used Panasonic Lumix G7 with a 7 Artisans lens on there. They're both of those options are very inexpensive, and I'm on one right now.
Yeah, I think that I do think though that as soon as you say you're going to Atem Mini, I think you're going to go over $1,000. Like the camera, everything else that you do to it with the lighting, with the sound, I think you're going to crest over that. Next question.
Tom Ferguson, Phoenix, Arizona, wonders if the Linsol KZS10 Pros in-ear are still the recommended choice.
That's what I mean. I think these are the $50 ones, Tom. Is that the ones you're talking about? Yeah, the $50 ones are the ones. I think of the Linsouls in price point. There's a $25 or $30 version that sounds like it's mud. There's the $50 one, which is the one I'm using. I have I have them in every bag. And then there's the more professional versions. There's I don't know what they are, extremes or something or other that I keep around, but I find them very uncomfortable. There's some reason that they do sound a little bit better, but I can't wear them for more than about a half an hour. So I find that and those are like $130 or $150, and so the $50 ones are the right ones, in my opinion. And I use them. They are not accurate. If I'm trying to make a decision about mixing or something else like that, I'm using these Audio Technicas that I have here to listen to those. But they are, for being on the show, I find them to be great. Next question.
Ryan Raderman in Chicago, Illinois says, what would you recommend for a carrying case for the Linsol in-ear monitors?
Go ahead, Alex.
Ugreen makes a really nice little case for $8.99 on sale right now. I posted a link there.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri. What considerations are necessary in a $1,000 studio when the room it's in is also your bedroom?
Go ahead, Jason.
This is a great question, and many of us started with studios in or very close to a bedroom. Mine started in college in a dorm room. And my first thought along these lines is that if you have a closet, it depends on what you're recording, really. But if you have a closet, be mindful of different ways to use that space, possibly a vocal booth, or, I don't know, any sort of thing along those lines. Also, remember that the mattress is something you can move, and it is an excellent sound barrier.
Good, Tom.
Also give thought to the overhead lighting. Make ssure that it's the same color temperature as the lights you're trying to use for your primary lights.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
And also, when it comes back to sound, a lot of us started out our first things. In fact, my first commercial voiceover job was for a TV station in Phoenix, and their voice booth was a closet. It was literally the tape closet. Whenever I came in to do my daybook announcing stuff, they would set up a mic in the closet and sit me in there. If you have enough space in your closet, that can be a good audio place for doing voiceovers and things like that. So, you're using every bit of space you can. If you are there and you have a bunch of coats and things like that are good things, sometimes leaving the door open even and setting up your space so that you're either in front of or right next to that coat closet will keep some of the reflections from getting in there. So that's a bedroom use tip.
Yeah, and if you're sensitive to what's behind you, whether it's a bedroom or your kitchen or your living room, you also want to think about potentially the Manfrotto collapsible reversible background. So this is a gray on one side, white on the other, a gray on one side, black on the other. Now it's like a $250 or $270 or something like that. But what it'll do is it's just something that will pop open and it's just gray behind you. And so that's something that if you're not sensitive to it, then it's fine. And if you keep a bed clean and structured, it's fine back there. But if you're sensitive to it, I think a lot of people during COVID became sensitive to showing everybody their kitchen or showing everybody their living room or showing any multi-use room, you can pop up a screen behind you and kind of cover that up. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago says, is the OSC control for OBSBOT only on the new model, or is it a firmware update to the previous 4K?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the older ones. We're focused on the newer one because of the chip size, because of some of the other quality things that they added. And I don't know if the OSE works on the older ones or not. So it's something the jury's still out on. Next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston. Can the Insta360 Link, being rather small, sitting directly in front of a largest monitor, be a good alternative to using a teleprompter?
So we actually do that with Michael Krasny's show. We have a very small little tripod, and Mike, I asked him, like, does this bother you? And it didn't bother him at all. So it's a very small tripod with a thin arm that goes up, and we just put the Insta360 right in the middle of the monitor so that he's just looking right at it. And on one side of that, he sees Makana, the teleprompter view, so he can kind of just read questions, and on the other side, he sees the person he's talking to. It's worked really well. Yeah. So, I think that cost effectively that could work. You can also remember that a teleprompter is not nearly, I've built a teleprompter once with a cardboard box. So I literally was able to find glass that was silvered, and I literally cut a 45-degree thing out of a cardboard box and just set it on the monitor, and we had a teleprompter. And so you don't need to have something complicated. It's all about the mirrored glass. And so that can be bought for a lot less. You can get an industrial version, which isn't quite as sharp, for $60, $70. You get a real teleprompter glass for $600 or $700, and then you build around that as well. So there's some other cost-effective ways to do that. Any glass company that's in a major city will have mirrored glass. You just have to decide what the transmission is. Is it 60/40, 70/30, et cetera? Next question.
Next question comes to us from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. What's the model of the OC White boom that Alex and Jason are using?
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I pulled it up. It is not cheap. Let's see here. It's this one here.
Is that what you're using, or is that?
Yes, that's what I'm using.
Yeah, it's the Ultima. Is that what you're? Yeah,
Ultima.
Yeah, and I've got a height riser on mine too. So Alex, I think, is going straight across. I've got a 45-degree up in addition to this, adjustable stand.
Yeah, I think mine's like an Ultima 2 Ultima Gen 2 ultra low profile is the one that I'm using. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
And I'm using the ancient OC White one that I've had for probably 30 years. Let me turn that back up. Right. It's got springs and everything. It's still quiet and still does the job beautifully. I've had it for probably 40 years.
And don't get the red one. There's a red one. I'm like, why would you make your mic thing red?
Jock.
Yes, let's go. Yeah, that seems like a very odd thing to do. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What is the gear list for an under $1,000 rolling table that you could move around your offices? And what brand table would you use?
It's a good question. Here's the worst part. I have one that's sitting in a box that's been sitting in a box for quite some time that I bought that goes up and down and rolls around. And I can't find out. I decided it's still sitting in a box because I decided to get another one that's like the one I have here, which has got a table and other things to it. Go ahead, Jason.
My entire desk was $400 from Monoprice, and it was because the desk part is just plywood. I bought the up-down legs. It's a pretty big desk, and it's going, a 90-degree angle, so it's an L-shaped desk. That and some heavy, solid caster wheels, and I'm away to the races.
Yeah, go, Bill.
Yeah, I would just be careful about that. Remember, we've all kind of built our rigs up, and they get kind of top heavy with all the monitors and all the equipment and things like that. In the past, I have had lightweight stands and I've done production in the field. I've almost always really quickly in my career moved to a heavier weight stand. It's a little harder to travel with and pack down and break down, but the stability has never felt like a wrong decision to me. I like things that are really stable if you're moving around.
And the one that I do have that I haven't constructed yet, but it's still sitting there waiting to be constructed is the Fezzibo. It's a Fezzibo, dual monitor height adjustable electric standing desk. So it has wheels and it goes up and down. And it looks pretty stable, and I'll let you know as I build it out. Go ahead, Jason.
And to Bill's point, I wouldn't play around with just any plywood. This is 2 inches thick, and it's double reinforced with T-joints kind of all over it. Because, yes, if this desk cracks, a lot of money just goes away.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago back again with Alex. Can you share the Insta360 carrying case you had shared previously? Did they sell out?
Yeah, let me case. Let's see, Insta3.
We're about to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, order them quickly when we do this. The one that I got that I'm happy with is here, I'll put it in. I'm going to. Let's see here. It's called the the Vision. I don't, these crazy names for these. But it's a Vision storage case for the Insta360. I mean, someone made one for $18. They and I'll put it into the link here. Hold on, let me get into the right page, and I will put it in here. So this is the one I just put it into the Makana into the chat. So that's the one that I use. I've got 4 of them. I got one for each of my Insta360s, and I'm super happy with it. So it's is big enough to hold the Insta360. Plus, I have a long cable with it, and I tied it really tight and stuck it in there, and so it'll hold that. It also, it does all the things it needs to do, and you clamp them down. It made it so much easier for me to move things around. I highly recommend one. Next question. Roscoe
Jones in Madison, Indiana, up next with what kind of drawings and or graphics would you do for a $1,000 system?
I think that would be difficult depending on what you wanted to do with that. It depends on what else you already have. So the thing that has become much more affordable are things like Wacom tablets and so on and so forth. So you potentially do it with a Wacom. I use a Wacom tablet, but there's also a lot of tablets that are $150 or whatever. When it comes to drawing, I definitely prefer to be able to see what I'm drawing over top of. And so Video Pencil is one. If you have an iPad, Video Pencil by Square TV has got that might work for what you're doing, depending on what you're interfacing with and whether it can see it and so on and so forth. You really do want something that you can draw there. But that's, do you have an iPad? Do you have a phone? Do you have those things, or start to become more important as you go from there? Next question.
Looks like the last one from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Anyone aware of teleprompter reversal apps that work on the Amazon Fire 10-inch?
What I recommend, and I know that in a larger environment, in a more production environment, Courtney has often talked about the fact that you don't want to have anything reverse it. You want the hardware to reverse it so that you can decide which way it's going for lots of different monitors. But for a $1,000 studio, I would recommend buying software that will do the reversal for you. So, you can get teleprompt software, almost every teleprompt software on a Mac at least will reverse the text. So that's something that you want to kind of think through is the software that will do it. Then you don't have to worry about doing it on the far end. So that'd be the thing that I would think about there. Oh, that was a good conversation. Covered a lot of ground there. It's good. We got one more. Did one more slide in there?
No, I just wanted to interject that Harshid actually, we do have one, but Harshid Trivedi actually has $1,000 studio. This came up in chat. I'm like, whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah. So she's showing you how good it can be. That's great. We have one more question.
Yeah, the last one. Roscoe from Madison, Roscoe Jones. Are there any user documents that you would create for a studio?
I mean, there's always user documents. If you're doing it for someone else, I mean, even if it's a simple one, I recommend whether it's H2R graphics or OmniGraffle or other things like that. I think that that you should build a little wiring diagram. Like, this is where everything is going. This goes into here. This goes into here. You have little, like, just so you know. And then I would keep that active. So you want to turn, like, say if you change something, change it on the diagram. It's so much easier to think about when you're trying to think about how am I going to do something else is to make that actually something you can see. So use it as a way to kind of grow into it from there. All right. Thanks, everybody. I think that was a good little conversation here. We traveled 67,000 miles today, 108,000 kilometers. That's more than 536 million bananas for scale. So good. It was good, and it was. And I think that we're going to keep on having these discussions. So keep on thinking about those things. One thing to remember is we cover these subjects in detail for a second hour, but hopefully they stir up some ideas. You can always ask questions about studios, of course, in the regular first hour of every day. So every day that we talk here, you can always ask the kind of questions. If this gets you thinking about things and you still have questions, go ahead and throw those in to our general discussion. So you don't have to wait for the next studio one to ask those questions. A quick reminder that we have the volunteer. There's in the email that goes out. There's a click to give you information about the volunteer meeting tomorrow. So I'm going to be there, and Josh and some other folks are going to be there talking about volunteering. And so if you're interested, there's so many opportunities inside of what we're doing, whether it's live production or research or prep and all these other bits and pieces. So if you're interested in that, make sure to look at the website or look at the email, and it'll send you to the right place to be there. But it'll be right after our show tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Okay. Thanks so much to the producers. It's really, really great to, you have a lot of questions. We got to almost 50 today, first and second hour. So really thank you for keeping the show going, because you do. Thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. And of course, thanks to the incredible staff on the back end that makes this happen every single day, 7 days a week, year round. It's amazing. All right. We'll talk to you soon. We're now jumping into after hours. Oh, we're going to send out an announcement. Walter merch is in the house later today for Gray Matter. So we'll send it out. Look in Discord. But you can ask questions from Walter merch. That's all I'm saying.
Walter merch at some time, undisclosed. Zulu. Yeah. So it's coming 11 a.m. today. We'll put an announcement out on Discord. Stay tuned.